After many months of people calling for more clarity from the CDC about COVID safety rules, the agency's director managed to inject yet more confusion after this exchange with Fox News anchor Bret Baier.
Are you for mandating a vaccine on a federal level?
You know, that's something that I think the administration is looking into. It's something that I think we're looking to see approval of from the vaccine. We're looking into those policies.
Oops, but shortly after, Dr. Rochelle Walensky took to Twitter to write, I was referring to mandates by private institutions and portions of the federal government. There will be no federal mandate. Of course, many organizations, both public and private, have started to institute their own vaccine mandates, including recently Google, Disney, Facebook, the Washington Post, the state of New York, and federal workplaces, plus the auditor and treasurer's offices here. But are they legal? Can private employers issue such mandates? Schools, local governments, the feds? I'm joined now by Brian Richichi. He's an employment litigator at Krokidas Bluestein. Brian, it's good to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Can we start in the private sector for a minute? As I said, the number is growing. Everybody knows that. But others are saying, private sector leaders are saying, under the so-called emergency use authorization, we can't mandate anything. We have to wait for full licensure, which is not going to come at least until the fall. Are they right?
No, I don't agree, and the Department of Justice doesn't agree. It recently issued an opinion from the Office of Legal Counsel saying that the restrictions of the EUA, the emergency use authorization, the right of a patient to decline, that's between them and the person providing them. There's nothing that would stop a private employer from requiring all of its employees be vaccinated before coming into the workplace.
And I want to clarify, just not that it's necessary, but I will anyway. An employer can't require you to get vaccinated, but they can require that you be vaccinated if you want to work at their operation. Is that not accurate?
Yeah, yes, and I think that distinction's key. I think that's what the clip you just showed from the CDC was getting at. It's not that your employer is requiring you to go out and get the vaccine. They're saying, well, COVID poses a direct threat to the others in our workplace, and so everyone coming into the workplace must be vaccinated.
Brian, let's stay in the private sector for a minute. Much of the focus has been on what happens if private sectors do this mandate. Let's flip it for a second. What happens if they don't? Let's assume your legal analysis, and the Office of Legal Counsel, the Department of Justice, is right, that you can do it. You choose not to do it, and somebody gets sick at your workplace because an unvaccinated person comes in and gets them sick. Does an employer have potential liability for their failure to act?
There may well be potential liability. It's going to depend, of course, on all of what they do. There are OSHA guidelines that govern the workplace. There are other protections. You know, before we had the vaccines, employers were taking all sorts of steps to keep employees safe when they were in the workplace. But beyond just actual liability, I think many employers are really concerned about the enormous public relations liability of being associated with an outbreak. I mean, everyone who's heard the word Provincetown in the last few weeks is thinking about that outbreak. You know, nobody wants to say, oh, we were the company who's associated with the latest Delta outbreak in Boston, in Woburn, wherever.
Let's move to the public sector. I'm assuming there's no dispute that if a school or a school system wants to mandate vaccinations, they mandate plenty of vaccinations, they can mandate this one. Am I right?
Yes, yes. I mean, this is just one more vaccination in the long line that have been required for attending educational institutions.
Okay, so local, state, and federal governments. I read a story this morning about some Supreme Court case, the name of which, of course, I forget, from about 100 years ago, which theoretically establishes the notion that state and local governments could mandate such vaccinations, but it doesn't cover the feds. Let's start with state and local. I assume they can clearly mandate their own employees be vaccinated.
Yeah.
Can they go beyond that and mandate that I be vaccinated?
Potentially. I mean, again, we're digging back to 1905.
That's it.
Looking for precedent about that, and it's Massachusetts again in the news. But you know, that really, to me, heightens that this is an unprecedented situation we're in right now. If we're looking 100 and almost 20 years in the past to see the last time courts have really grappled with this. But I do think, yes, certainly employees. But it seems, and certainly states and localities have powers to deal with public health.
And the Fed question is an open question, not resolved by any legal authority, correct?
I'm not aware of anything that has resolved that
Can
question.
we move to another venue other than employers, insurance companies? My understanding is some state laws allow for insurance companies to raise rates on, let's pick one group of individuals, smokers. Can insurance companies in states which allow such, I would say, some might call it discrimination, different rate structures based on behaviors, create a higher rate structure for people who voluntarily choose not to be vaccinated?
Well, to be clear, I'm not an insurance lawyer, and
Okay.
that is a bit outside of my bailiwick. But I know that that's something people are talking about, and there's been a fair amount of debate about whether that is permissible and whether this is the situation similar to smoking or whether this is more akin to a pre-existing condition or some other aspect of someone's medical history.
I can't believe how happy you looked when you said you weren't an insurance lawyer, by the way. So I'm glad to put you in that position. You know, Brian, one last...
All respect to my colleagues who do that.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Let's go back to a second for what you said about the public relations issue. Obviously, you have clients who are considering this, so you probably have a better fix on what the future looks like. Do a little Nostradamus for us. The trend from this past week, particularly with the big boys, has been to mandate vaccines. As Delta becomes more of an issue, as we get closer to reentry to schools come late August or September, I'm assuming that the percentage of companies, private sector companies, mandating vaccines is going to grow exponentially. Am I right?
Through the roof. And Delta is really the key. You know, when I was talking to clients in April, May, looking forward, the emphasis was much more on vaccine encouragement. How do we encourage employees to get vaccinated? How do we make this easy, time off, on-site vaccinations? Over the last month and change, there's been a total shift, and everyone is talking about mandates now, how to implement it, when to implement it, because there are, of course, many different versions of it. You know, some places say you have to be mandated. Some places say, well, if you're not vaccinated, there's going to be a very strict testing regimen, or you know, there are lots of variations available to employers to tailor to their business model, their needs, the reality of their workforce.
Thanks for sharing your expertise, Brian. It was really helpful. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.